My 10-year-old son came home from school and softly said, "Dad, promise you won't get angry." I nodded, but tears filled his eyes. "My friend's dad works with the police. He said something about Mommy." Then he handed me a crumpled note. I unfolded it, and froze in absolute shock. You know, there are some moments in life when your whole world just tilts. 1 second, everything's normal, and the next, you find yourself staring at a piece of paper that screams betrayal, knowing with chilling certainty that your wife, the woman you swore to protect, is your enemy. And the messenger? My own 10-year-old son. What the hell do you do then? It all started just like any other day. I was out in the garage, the familiar comfort of cleaning my hunting rifle keeping me grounded. 15 years in Army Special Forces teaches you rituals, keeps you sane after 3 tours in Afghanistan. Oil, polish, check the action, it's a rhythm. Then, BM. The front door slammed. It echoed through our suburban home like a gunshot, sharp and final. My hands, scarred from a decade and a half of war, didn't even flinch. But then I heard Mark's voice. "Hi." Nervous. And that's when every instinct I had, every alarm bell that had kept me alive in Kandahar, started screaming. I put the rifle down, my steel-gray eyes already tracking the sound. At 42, I could read danger in the smallest things, a shifted shadow, a trembling voice, the way someone avoided eye contact. Mark's tone had all 3. Inside, I found him hunched over the kitchen island, his small frame shaking. His backpack lay forgotten by the door, its contents spilled across the hardwood floor I'd installed with my own 2 hands. "What's wrong, son?" I asked, my voice calm despite the churning in my gut. He snapped his head up. His cheeks were streaked with tears, and his eyes, they looked years older than 10 should allow. "Dad, promise me you won't get mad." I nodded, though every fiber of my being was on high alert. This wasn't an IED, not sniper fire, but here in our pristine kitchen, surrounded by Rebecca's carefully arranged orchids, it felt infinitely worse. Mark's crying intensified, great, heaving sobs that shook his narrow shoulders. "My friend's dad works in police. He said something about Mommy." The words tumbled out between gasps. "He told me to give you this." With trembling fingers, Mark handed over a crumpled piece of paper. As I unfolded it, my world truly tilted. My mind struggled to process the familiar handwriting. Detective Clint Hampton. Clint was solid, a 20-year veteran. Our sons were friends. The note read, "Clayton, meet me at Murphy's bar tonight at 9 p.m. Come alone. What I have to show you about Rebecca will destroy your family, but you need to know. Trust no one else with this. Clint." My expression didn't change. But inside, something fundamental shifted. The same cold calculation that had kept me alive in war zones activated instantly. "Mark." My voice carried the steady authority I'd used on battle-hardened soldiers. "Go to your room now." He scrambled away, leaving me alone with that note and the terrible certainty that my life was about to change forever. I'd been forged in the crucible of war, orphaned at 16, straight into the army. It gave me purpose, discipline, a moral code carved in stone, loyalty above all else, zero tolerance for betrayal. I met Rebecca at a military ball 7 years ago. I was drawn to her sophisticated beauty, her seemingly genuine warmth. She claimed to love my strength, my unwavering principles. Now, staring at Clint's warning, it hit me like a gut punch. I'd been living with an enemy. The hours crawled by like wounded animals. Rebecca returned from her book club at 6:30. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, her designer dress unwrinkled despite supposedly spending hours discussing literature. She chatted about her day while preparing dinner, her voice bright and artificial as porcelain. "How was your day, honey?" she asked, not looking up from the stove. "Fine," I replied, watching her. Cataloging details I'd previously ignored, the new perfume, the expensive handbag I hadn't bought her, the way she never quite met my eyes anymore. At 8:45 I kissed her forehead, a gesture that now felt like marking a target. "Going out for a beer with the guys. Back late." She smiled, that same radiant expression that had captivated me years ago. "Have fun, darling. Murphy's bar squatted on the outskirts of town like a wounded beast, all dark wood and dim lighting. I arrived early, choosing a corner booth that gave me clear sight lines to all entrances. Old habits die hard. Clint Hampton arrived precisely at 9, his weathered face grim as a funeral director's. He slid a manila envelope across the scarred table without preamble. "How long?" I asked, not touching the envelope. "6 months that I know of." "Probably longer." Clint's voice carried the weight of a man delivering a terminal diagnosis. "I'm sorry, Clay. God knows I didn't want to be the one to tell you." I opened the envelope with steady hands. The photographs inside showed Rebecca entering a downtown hotel with Aaron Weaver, a local real estate developer I recognized from charity events. The images were time-stamped, dated, professional quality. In the final photo, they were kissing in the hotel lobby with the desperate passion of teenagers. "There's more," Clint said quietly. "Audio recordings, video from the hotel room. She's been using your credit cards to pay for their meetings." Something cold and ancient awakened in my chest. Not rage. Rage was hot, uncontrolled, wasteful. This was something far more dangerous. The patient, methodical fury of a predator who'd found his prey. I studied each photograph with clinical detachment, memorizing faces, times, locations. Rebecca had violated the fundamental rule of my existence: absolute loyalty. In my world, betrayal carried only one possible consequence. "What do you need from me?" Clint asked. I finally looked up. Clint Hampton, a man who'd faced down armed criminals and drug dealers without flinching, had to suppress a shiver at what he saw in those gray eyes. "Time," I said. "And your silence." Chapter 2. The hunt begins. I returned home to find Rebecca asleep, her breathing soft and regular in our king-sized bed. For a moment, I stood in the doorway, studying the woman I'd shared my life with, searching for some sign of the stranger she'd apparently always been. Her face, relaxed in sleep, looked younger, almost innocent. The irony wasn't lost on me. I moved through the house like a ghost, my special forces training making me soundless on the hardwood floors. In my study, I powered up my computer and began what I did best: intelligence gathering. Aaron Weaver's life unfolded across multiple browser tabs. 38 years old, divorced twice. Owner of Weaver Properties, a mid-level real estate firm specializing in commercial development. His social media painted him as a man who believed his own press releases, photos of expensive watches, luxury cars, and various women who weren't his ex-wives. The type who measured success in square footage and stock options. But I dug deeper, accessing databases most civilians never knew existed. Military connections had their advantages. Aaron's financial records revealed a man living beyond his means, leveraging one investment to fund the next in an increasingly desperate pyramid. His divorce settlements had been brutal, leaving him cash poor despite his apparent wealth. More interesting were the personal details. Aaron Weaver had grown up in foster care, bouncing between homes until aging out of the system at 18. No family, no real friends, no one who would miss him if he simply disappeared. My phone buzzed with a text message. "Couldn't sleep. Thought about you all night. Can't wait until Friday." I checked the number against my contact list. Rebecca's phone. She'd been texting her lover while lying 3 feet away from her husband. Friday. 2 days away. I smiled for the first time since reading Clint's note, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. The next morning, Rebecca performed her usual routine with Academy Award-worthy precision: coffee, toast, a kiss on my cheek before heading to her yoga class. I'd verified months ago that no such class existed at the time she claimed to attend. After she left, I called sick to my job at the security firm. The first sick day I'd taken in 3 years. I had work to do. My first stop was Weaver Properties, a glass and steel monument to Aaron's ego located in the business district. I parked across the street and settled in to observe the same patients that had served me during countless surveillance operations in hostile territory. Aaron Weaver emerged at 11 a.m., every inch the successful businessman in his tailored suit and confident stride. I followed at a distance, noting his patterns. Lunch at an upscale restaurant, a stop at a jewelry store where Aaron spent 20 minutes examining expensive pieces, a visit to the same downtown hotel where Clint's photographs had been taken. I'd seen enough. I drove to Rebecca's actual location, a coffee shop 3 blocks from the hotel, where she sat with 2 other women, laughing and animated. Her book club. Apparently, at least that part hadn't been a complete lie. I photographed her through the window, time-stamped and dated, evidence for later use. That evening, Rebecca returned home bubbling with enthusiasm about her day. We had the most amazing discussion about the new Gillian Flynn novel. She lied smoothly. You really should read it, honey. I nodded, playing the role of the trusting husband, while internally cataloging each deception. Sounds interesting. Maybe you could read it to me sometime. Of course, darling. Another lie, delivered with a bright smile. After dinner, I excused myself to my study. Using techniques learned from military intelligence operations, I installed spyware on Rebecca's laptop and phone while she showered. The programs were military-grade, invisible to standard detection software, and would record everything: calls, texts, emails, location data, even ambient conversations. My phone buzzed with the first intercept 20 minutes later. Rebecca, supposedly reading in the bedroom, was actually texting Aaron. He suspects nothing. Friday can't come soon enough. I'm so tired of pretending. Aaron's response chilled my blood. Soon you won't have to. Once we're together permanently, you can divorce him and take half of everything. Guy's a decorated war hero. Judge will favor the poor abandoned wife. What about Mark? Kids? Not mine. Not my problem. I closed my eyes, feeling something inside me break beyond repair. They weren't just planning to destroy my marriage. They intended to steal my son, my home, my future. Everything I'd built after surviving war zones would be handed to a real estate developer and a woman who'd spent months perfecting her betrayal. I opened my laptop and began researching property records, business licenses, and financial documents. Aaron Weaver had made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated his target. I had toppled enemy governments with less information than I was gathering now. Aaron and Rebecca had declared war on the wrong soldier. By midnight, I'd assembled a complete psychological profile of my targets and identified 17 different pressure points I could exploit: Aaron's financial desperation, Rebecca's social status obsession, their mutual arrogance, and the assumption that they were smarter than the simple soldier they were betraying. I'd pulled up building schematics for Aaron's office, his home, and the hotel where they conducted their affair, traffic patterns, security cameras, escape routes. The kind of operational planning that had kept me alive in Afghanistan would now serve a different purpose. Tomorrow, I would begin destroying them both. Methodically. Completely. Without mercy. I'd learned in war that the key to victory wasn't superior firepower. It was superior planning combined with absolute ruthlessness. Aaron and Rebecca had revealed their battle plan through their own words. Now, I would show them what happened when amateurs declared war on a professional. I drafted a single text message to an old army contact. Need a favor? Completely off the books. We'll pay well. The response came within minutes. Name it, Sergeant. You pulled me out of that mess in Kandahar. I owe you? I smiled again, cold and predatory. The hunt was about to begin. Chapter 3. Setting the trap. The next morning dawned gray and cold, matching my mood as I sat in my kitchen, nursing black coffee and watching Rebecca prepare for another day of deception. She moved through our morning routine with practiced efficiency, chattering about mundane household matters while internally counting down hours until her next rendezvous with Aaron. I'll be out most of the day, she announced, checking her appearance in the hallway mirror. Shopping with in Holland, then book club runs late tonight. Don't wait up. And Holland. I filed that name away with the growing list of Rebecca's accomplices and enablers. In my experience, conspiracies always involved more people than the primary targets realized. After Rebecca left, I made my second call to Clint Hampton. I need background on in Holland. Everything you can find. Click. Clint's voice carried a warning. Whatever you're planning, nothing illegal. I interrupted, though we both knew that was a relative term. Just protecting my interests. I'll have something by tonight. My next call was to Sergeant Lawrence Massey, my former Army contact who now operated a private security consulting firm. A polite euphemism for solving problems that required particular skills. Package arrives this afternoon, Lawrence confirmed. Everything you requested, plus some extras I thought you might appreciate. The package arrived at 2 p.m. via unmarked delivery, sophisticated surveillance equipment, untraceable communication devices, and other tools that civilian law enforcement couldn't legally access. I inspected each item with professional appreciation. Quality gear from people who understood the mission. My phone chimed with an intercept from Rebecca's device. She was coordinating with Aaron for their Friday meeting. But more importantly, she was texting in Holland. Clayton's been acting strange, quiet, watching me, think he knows. Ann's response revealed everything. Calm down. Men are oblivious. Just act normal until you can file papers. My lawyer says with his military PTSD issues, you'll get everything. Military PTSD. My jaw tightened. They intended to paint me as an unstable veteran, too damaged by war to be trusted with custody of my own son. The narrative would play perfectly to a sympathetic judge. Poor Rebecca, trapped with a dangerous husband suffering from combat trauma. It was almost brilliant. It was also their death sentence. I drove to Aaron's office building and surveyed the structure with a professional eye. Glass facade, single stairwell, predictable security measures. I noted the positions of surveillance cameras, identified blind spots, and mapped escape routes. The building's architectural plans, obtained through Lawrence's contacts, revealed structural weaknesses that could prove useful. At 4 p.m., I positioned myself across from Mark's school and waited. My son emerged, chatting with other children, his face animated and innocent. I felt a stab of something that might have been regret. Mark would be collateral damage in what was coming. But the boy's loyalty had already been tested when he delivered Clint's message. And I believed in absolute consequences for absolute choices. That evening, Clint delivered Ann Holland's file. Divorced, bitter, years older than Rebecca and twice as vindictive. Her ex-husband had remarried a younger woman, leaving and nursing fantasies of revenge against all men. She'd been poisoning Rebecca's marriage for months, feeding her friends dissatisfaction while encouraging the affair. There's more, Clint said grimly. Ann's been in contact with a divorce attorney. They'd been building a case against you for weeks. PTSD, emotional instability, possible domestic violence. They have medical records, character witnesses, the whole package. I absorbed this information without visible reaction. Who's the attorney? Samantha D.S. Specializes in high-conflict divorces. Plays dirty. Good to know. My voice carried no emotion. But Clint had seen that look before, on the faces of Special Forces operators preparing for combat. Clay, don't do anything you can't walk away from. Too late for that. After Clint left, I reviewed the complete intelligence picture. Rebecca, Aaron, Ann, and now attorney Samantha D.S. A conspiracy designed to destroy me systematically and legally. They'd spent months preparing, assuming their target was a simple soldier, too trusting to see the trap closing around him. They'd made one fundamental error. They'd mistaken discipline for weakness. I opened my secure laptop and began drafting operational plans. Phase 1 would be psychological warfare, applying pressure to stress fractures in their alliance. Phase 2 would escalate to direct action, forcing them into increasingly desperate mistakes. Phase 3 would be the final confrontation, where I'd reveal the full extent of their miscalculation. I'd pulled up Aaron's financial records again, noting the delicate balance of the man's leveraged investments. A few strategic moves could topple that house of cards, forcing Aaron into financial desperation. Desperate people made stupid decisions. Rebecca's weakness was her social status. Her affair was built on the fantasy of upgrading to Aaron's supposedly wealthy lifestyle. Learning the truth about his financial situation would shatter that illusion. and Holland's vulnerability was her bitterness. She lived vicariously through Rebecca's affair, projecting her own revenge fantasies onto her friend's situation. Disrupting that dynamic would turn ally into enemy. And attorney Samantha Diaz? She was a professional predator who'd made the mistake of targeting the wrong prey. My phone buzzed with another intercept. Rebecca texting from her supposed book club. Tomorrow night. Finally going to tell him I want a divorce. Aaron will be waiting at the hotel if things go badly. Tomorrow night. Friday. They'd accelerated their timeline, probably spooked by whatever and had observed about my behavior. Perfect. I preferred enemies who acted from fear rather than careful planning. I drafted a message to Lawrence. Operation begins tomorrow night. Need you and 2 others on standby. Civilian clothes, non-lethal approach, but prepared for escalation. The response was immediate. Copy that, Sergeant. Rules of engagement. I stared at the screen for a long moment, thinking about Mark's tearful face, Rebecca's months of deception, Aaron's casual dismissal of a 10-year-old boy's welfare. No prisoners. I spent the rest of the evening making final preparations, equipment checked and staged, vehicles positioned, contact protocols established. By midnight, everything was ready for the confrontation that would determine whether Clayton Holloway remained the trusting husband his enemies believed him to be, or revealed the predator they'd awakened through their betrayal. Rebecca returned home at 11:30, sliding into bed beside me with practiced quiet. I felt her presence like a serpent coiled against my back, venomous and deadly. She whispered, "Good night, honey," into the darkness. I almost admired the perfection of her performance. "Good night, Rebecca," I replied. It would be her last peaceful sleep for a very long time. Chapter 4. The perfect storm. Friday evening arrived with the weight of destiny. I sat in my study, watching through hidden cameras as Rebecca prepared for what she believed would be her liberation. She'd chosen her outfit carefully, a red dress I'd bought her for our anniversary. A detail that struck me as particularly vindictive. At 6 p.m., she appeared in my doorway wearing the smile that had once melted my defenses. "I'll be late tonight, honey. Ann and I are trying that new restaurant downtown, then probably drinks after." I nodded from behind my newspaper, the perfect picture of domestic contentment. "Have fun. Give and my regards." The irony wasn't lost on me. In 3 hours, and Holland would indeed receive my regards, though not in the way Rebecca intended. After she left, I activated my surveillance network. Through hidden cameras and tracking devices, I watched Rebecca drive directly to the downtown hotel where Aaron waited. She parked in the underground garage, probably believing she was invisible to prying eyes. She was wrong. My phone buzzed with a status update from Lawrence. "Teams in position, target building secured, awaiting orders." I checked my watch. 7:15 p.m. Rebecca and Aaron would be settled into their routine by now, confident and careless. Time to shatter their world. My first call was to Ann Holland's apartment. She answered on the second ring, her voice slightly slurred from what was probably her nightly wine ritual. "And this is Clayton Holloway, Rebecca's husband." The silence stretched like a held breath. "Clayton, How did you get this number? I need to speak with you tonight. It's about Rebecca and Aaron Weaver." "I don't know what you're talking about." "The Hampton Hotel, room 412. Right now." My voice carried the authority of command. "You have 15 minutes to get there, or I start making calls to your employer, your ex-husband, and everyone else who might find your role in this interesting." A sharp intake of breath told me everything. "You can't prove anything." 15 minutes. "And the elevator cameras have excellent resolution." I ended the call. Immediately, I dialed Aaron's office number. The call rolled to voicemail. As expected, Aaron was busy with Rebecca. I left a message designed to create maximum paranoia. "Aaron, this is Detective Clint Hampton. We need to discuss your relationship with Rebecca Holloway immediately. Call me back within the hour or we'll be having this." Conversation downtown. I used a voice modulation app to mimic Clint's gruff tone perfectly. The message would terrify Aaron, especially since he'd assumed Rebecca's husband had discovered the affair and involved police. Next, I called Samantha Diaz's emergency number. Lawyers like her always maintain 24-hour contact for desperate clients. Miss Diaz, Clayton Holloway. I understand you've been preparing some paperwork concerning my marriage. Mr. Holloway, I can't discuss your right. We'll discuss it in court, along with your unethical pre-filing communications with my wife and her co-conspirators. I've documented everything. That's impossible. Client privilege doesn't apply to criminal conspiracy to commit fraud. Good night, counselor. I smiled as I ended the call. 3 carefully placed calls had just turned allies into panicked enemies, each one now questioning whether the others could be trusted. My surveillance feed showed the first cracks appearing. Rebecca's phone was buzzing constantly, and trying to reach her, probably. Aaron looked agitated, checking his phone repeatedly, while Rebecca grew increasingly annoyed with his distraction. At 8 p.m., I activated Phase 2. I sent a text to Rebecca's phone, spoofing Aaron's number. Emergency. My ex-wife found out about us. She's threatening to call your husband. Need to talk now. Rebecca's face went pale as she read the message. I watched her excuse herself from the hotel room, leaving Aaron alone and vulnerable. Simultaneously, I sent a message to Aaron's phone, spoofing Rebecca's number. Clayton knows. And told him everything. I'm going to his office to try to smooth things over. Don't contact me. Now, both targets were isolated and operating on false information, exactly where I wanted them. My next move was inspired by years of psychological operations. I called the hotel's front desk from a burner phone, using a disguised voice to report suspicious activity in room 412. Not enough to trigger a police response, but sufficient to ensure hotel security would investigate. Aaron, alone in the room and expecting Rebecca to return, would instead face uncomfortable questions from hotel security while believing Rebecca had abandoned him to face my wrath alone. My surveillance showed Rebecca in the hotel lobby, frantically trying to call and getting no answer, and was probably driving toward the hotel in a panic, torn between self-preservation and loyalty to her co-conspirator. Time for the final touch. I composed a group text to Rebecca, Aaron, and Samantha Diaz from an untraceable number. The meeting is tonight. All parties present. Hampton Hotel Parking Garage, Level B2. Come alone or face the consequences of your choices. The message would terrify them, especially since it suggested someone knew about all 4 conspirators. They'd each assume one of the others had betrayed the group. By 8:03 p.m., my surveillance network showed all 4 targets converging on the hotel in various states of panic. Rebecca and Aaron would find each other, but their trust was already shattered by the false messages, and would arrive expecting to find Rebecca in crisis. Samantha Diaz would come prepared for damage control, but find chaos instead. I locked my house and drove toward downtown. My mind was calm despite the storm I'd unleashed. In my experience, the most effective battles were won before the enemy realized they were under attack. My phone buzzed with updates from Lawrence. Multiple targets arriving. Situation developing as planned. Ready for next phase. Hold position. Let them destroy each other first. I parked 3 blocks from the hotel and activated my mobile surveillance station. Through live feeds, I watched Rebecca and Aaron arguing in the parking garage while an Holland sedan circled nearby, its driver clearly confused and frightened. The trap was closing perfectly. 4 conspirators who'd spent months planning my destruction now faced each other with no trust, no communication, and no understanding of how their carefully constructed plot had collapsed into chaos. But I wasn't finished. The real demonstration was about to begin. Chapter 5. Fractures and Revelations. The parking garage beneath the Hampton Hotel had become a pressure cooker of fear and accusations. I watched through my mobile surveillance system as my targets gathered in the fluorescent-lit concrete tomb, each one believing they'd been summoned by an unknown enemy who somehow knew their secrets. Rebecca and Aaron stood near Aaron's BMW, their body language screaming conflict. Even without audio, I could see their relationship fracturing in real time. Aaron gestured angrily while Rebecca checked her phone obsessively, probably still trying to reach in, and Holland's sedan finally parked 2 spaces away. She emerged slowly, her face pale and drawn. The wine from earlier had clearly worn off, leaving her sober and terrified. She approached Rebecca cautiously, like someone walking into a minefield. The 4th player arrived precisely on schedule. Samantha Diaz stepped out of a black Mercedes, her lawyer's composure intact, but her eyes scanning the garage for threats. She'd come prepared for trouble. I noted the briefcase in her left hand and the way her right stayed near her purse. I activated the next phase of my operation. My first move was simple but devastating. I triggered the fire alarm in the hotel above. The piercing wail echoed through the parking garage, adding urgency and chaos to an already volatile situation. Emergency lighting kicked in, casting harsh shadows that made everyone look like criminals. Next, I used my voice modulation system to call each of their phones simultaneously, cycling through different disguised voices. To Rebecca, "Your husband knows everything. Aaron sold you out to save himself." To Aaron, "Rebecca is wearing a wire. She's been working with police for weeks. And the others are blaming you. They have recordings of your conversations." To Samantha, "Your clients are discussing a plea bargain. You're the sacrifice." I watched the group dynamics explode. Rebecca spun on Aaron, accusations flying, and backed toward her car, clearly ready to flee. Samantha moved to distance herself from all 3, her professional instincts screaming danger. But I wasn't done. Through Lawrence's team, I planted additional evidence throughout the garage, a briefcase containing fake FBI surveillance photos showing all 4 conspirators together. The photos were dated and documented as if they'd been under federal investigation for months. Lawrence, dressed as hotel security, approached the group with the briefcase. "Excuse me, folks, but we found this near your vehicles." It was reported as suspicious. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I could see the impact. Their faces went wide as they examined the surveillance photos. The fake federal documentation suggested they were targets of a major investigation. Exactly the kind of paranoia I needed to completely shatter their alliance. Samantha Diaz was the first to break. As an attorney, she recognized the implications immediately. If federal authorities were investigating the group, her career was finished. She turned on her heels and headed for her Mercedes without a word, abandoning her clients to save herself. And Holland was next. Whatever loyalty she'd felt toward Rebecca evaporated when faced with potential federal charges. She grabbed Rebecca's arm, hissing something urgent, then practically ran to her sedan. That left Rebecca and Aaron alone in the garage, surrounded by the wreckage of their conspiracy. I watched Aaron's body language shift from angry to calculating. The man was weighing his options, and Rebecca was clearly coming up short in his survival calculus. My phone buzzed with a message from Lawrence. "Targets separating. Female subject appears distressed. Male subject exhibiting aggressive behavior." Perfect. Phase 3 could begin. I started my truck and drove toward the hotel, but not directly. I took a circuitous route that would bring me to the garage entrance just as Rebecca would be leaving. The timing had to be precise. As I turned into the garage, my headlights swept across a scene of domestic destruction. Aaron was backing away from Rebecca, his hands raised defensively. Rebecca was advancing on him, her red dress vivid against the concrete walls, her voice echoing in the enclosed space. I parked and stepped out of my truck, moving with the deliberate calm that had served me in combat zones. Both Rebecca and Aaron froze when they saw me, their faces showing the exact moment they realized their worst fears had materialized. "Hello, Rebecca," I said, my voice carrying easily in the concrete space. "Aaron." Aaron stepped forward, trying to salvage the situation with desperate bravado. "Look, man, this isn't what it looks like," I interrupted. "I know exactly what this looks like. I know what it is." Rebecca found her voice, falling back on months of practiced deception. "Clayton, honey, I can explain." "Can you?" I pulled out my phone and played a recording of her voice. "I'm so tired of pretending. Once we're together permanently, You can divorce him and take half of everything. The blood drained from Rebecca's face. Aaron's expression shifted from defensive to dangerous. Cornered animals were always unpredictable. How long have you known? Rebecca whispered. Long enough. My eyes never left Aaron. Long enough to understand exactly who you both are. Aaron made his choice then, probably calculating that his best option was to eliminate the witness to his humiliation. He reached into his jacket, and I saw the metallic glint of a weapon. But Aaron Weaver had never faced a Special Forces operator in close combat. I moved with fluid precision, closing the distance before Aaron could clear his weapon. My first strike disabled Aaron's gun hand. My second put the man on the concrete, gasping and helpless. Don't, I said quietly, standing over Aaron's crumpled form. Don't make this worse than it already is. Rebecca was backing toward her car, her face a mask of terror. Clayton, please, we can work this out. No, I said, my voice final as a judge's gavel. We can't. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911, my eyes never leaving either of them. I need police at the Hampton Hotel parking garage. I've just interrupted an assault and discovered evidence of conspiracy to commit fraud. As sirens wailed in the distance, I stood in the harsh fluorescent light, surrounded by the wreckage of my marriage and the broken bodies of my enemies. The immediate battle was won, but the war was far from over. Rebecca and Aaron had underestimated their target, assuming they faced a simple soldier too damaged by war to fight back effectively. Instead, they'd awakened something far more dangerous. A predator with military training, unlimited patience, and absolutely nothing left to lose. The real reckoning was about to begin. Chapter 6. The unraveling. The police interrogation room smelled of disinfectant and desperation. I sat across from Detective Clint Hampton, my posture relaxed despite being handcuffed to the metal table. Through the one-way mirror, I could see officers processing Aaron Weaver, who was still nursing a dislocated shoulder and wounded pride. You want to tell me what really happened down there? Clint asked, his weathered face showing concern rather than accusation. I smiled, a cold expression that made my old friend shift uncomfortably. Aaron Weaver drew a weapon on me. I defended myself. Everything else is just collateral damage. Collateral damage. Clint repeated the phrase like it tasted bitter. Clay, I've known you for 8 years. This isn't you, is it? My voice carried the same flat effect I'd used when reporting enemy casualties in Afghanistan. Tell me, Clint, in your 20 years of police work, how many second chances do you give people who betray you? Clint was quiet for a long moment, understanding the message. In his world, as in my former world, certain lines couldn't be uncrossed. Rebecca's in the next room, Clint said carefully. She's telling a very different story. Claims you've been stalking her, threatening her. Says tonight was an ambush. And you believe her? I believe evidence. Clint slid a tablet across the table. These are the surveillance photos you planted in the garage. Military-grade forgeries. Very impressive work. I examined the photos with professional appreciation. Impressive? I'd call them adequate. The FBI documentation was more challenging. Their paper stock is difficult to replicate. So you admit to manufacturing evidence. I admit to revealing the truth through creative means. My gray eyes met Clint's directly. Every photo shows real events, real people, real conspiracies. The only fiction was the federal investigation. Clint rubbed his temples, looking every day of his 55 years. Clay, this is conspiracy to commit justice. I interrupted. Because that's what this is, Clint. Justice for a decorated veteran who trusted the wrong people. The door opened and Rebecca entered, flanked by a public defender. Samantha Diaz had apparently decided her reputation was worth more than her retainer fee. Rebecca's red dress was wrinkled and stained, her carefully styled hair now hanging in limp strands around her pale face. Hello, darling, I said pleasantly. Enjoying the accommodations? Rebecca's lawyer, a nervous young man named Jason Garrett, cleared his throat. Mr. Holloway, my client is prepared to testify about your pattern of threatening behavior. What pattern? My voice remained conversational. The pattern where I worked 60-hour weeks to support my family? The pattern where I trusted my wife completely? Or perhaps the pattern where I never once raised my voice, let alone my hand, in 7 years of marriage? You've been surveilling her, Rebecca said, her voice shaking. Stalking her, threatening her friends. I've been documenting criminal conspiracy to commit fraud. My correction was precise, clinical. There's a difference, though I understand why you might confuse the two. Clint leaned forward. Clay, we found surveillance equipment in your home. Audio recording devices, computer monitoring software. All perfectly legal in my own residence, I replied. I was protecting my assets from theft, which, as it turns out, was prescient. Jason Garrett tried again. Your client has admitted to manufacturing evidence, threatening witnesses. My client, Clint interrupted, hasn't been charged with anything yet. Aaron Weaver, on the other hand, is facing assault charges for drawing a weapon on an unarmed man. Rebecca's face crumpled. Clayton, please. Can't we work this out privately? For Mark's sake. For the first time since entering the room, my expression changed. The mask of professional calm slipped, revealing something far more dangerous underneath. Mark. The name came out like a curse. You want to discuss my son? Our son? Rebecca whispered. Is he? My voice dropped to barely above a whisper. But somehow, it filled the room. Because according to your text messages, he's not Aaron's problem. According to your legal strategy, he's a weapon to be used against his father's PTSD. I leaned forward, my handcuffs rattling against the table. Tell me, Rebecca, when exactly did you decide that destroying a 10-year-old boy's family was acceptable collateral damage in your little romance? You never meant for me to find out. My interruption was surgical in its precision. You meant to blindside me with divorce papers, paint me as an unstable veteran, and walk away with half my assets and full custody of my son. You meant to let Aaron Weaver help raise the child of a man he dismissed as irrelevant. Rebecca was crying now. Great, heaving sobs that might have moved me months ago. Now they simply provided confirmation that my assessment had been accurate. Where is Mark now? I asked Clint. Child Services picked him up from school. He's in temporary foster care until what? My voice carried a lethal quiet. Until a judge decides whether the decorated war veteran or the adulterous wife makes a better parent. The room fell silent except for Rebecca's muffled crying. I studied the faces around me, Clint's conflicted loyalty, Jason Garrett's obvious discomfort, Rebecca's theatrical grief. Clint, I said finally. I need 5 minutes alone with my wife. Clay, I can't. 5 minutes uncuffed. No recording devices. My eyes never left Rebecca's face. I think we need to discuss terms. Clint hesitated, then made the decision that would define the rest of the case. He unlocked my handcuffs and ushered Jason Garrett toward the door. 5 minutes, he warned. And Clay, nothing that I'll have to investigate later. The door closed, leaving husband and wife alone for the first time since the parking garage. I rubbed my wrists, studying Rebecca with the same clinical detachment I'd once used to assess enemy combatants. You have one chance, I said quietly. One opportunity to salvage something from this wreckage. Rebecca looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. What do you want? I smiled, and Rebecca suddenly understood why Aaron Weaver was still in the emergency room getting his shoulder reset. Everything, I said simply. Chapter 7. Terms of surrender. The interrogation room felt smaller with just the two of us, as if the walls were slowly contracting around Rebecca's increasingly desperate situation. I sat back in my chair, no longer the betrayed husband, but something far more dangerous, a predator negotiating terms with cornered prey. Everything? Rebecca repeated, her voice barely audible. What does that mean? My smile held no warmth. It means you're going to learn the difference between surrender and defeat. Surrender might leave you with something to salvage. Defeat? I shrugged. Defeat means I take everything and salt the earth behind me. Rebecca's hands trembled as she wiped tears from her cheeks. Clayton, please. We were married for 7 years. Doesn't that mean anything? It did. Past tense. My voice carried the finality of a closing coffin. Those 7 years taught me that you're an exceptional actress. The woman I thought I married never existed. That's not true. Isn't it? I leaned forward. The woman I married wouldn't have spent 6 months planning my destruction. She wouldn't have used our son as a weapon. She wouldn't have painted me as a dangerous veteran to justify stealing half my assets. Rebecca flinched at each accusation, recognizing the truth in them. I felt trapped. The marriage was comfortable. Secure? Boring? My interruption was surgical. Was it so terrible being married to a man who worked himself to exhaustion providing for you? So unbearable being the wife of someone who never raised his voice, never stayed out late, never gave you reason to doubt his loyalty? You don't understand, Rebecca said desperately. Aaron made me feel alive again, special, like I mattered. And I made you feel what? I asked, my voice edged with a bitter laugh. Safe? Stable? Loved? Poor Rebecca. Stuck with a husband who treated you like a queen instead of a conquest. Rebecca was sobbing again, but I felt no sympathy. Sympathy was for victims, not architects of their own destruction. Here are your options. I continued, my voice businesslike. Option 1, you fight this. You stick with your PTSD defense. Paint me as the dangerous veteran. Drag Mark through a custody battle that will traumatize him for life. In return, I destroy you completely. Every lie you've told, every deception you've practiced, every conspiracy you've participated in, it all becomes public record. Aaron Weaver's financial problems. And Holland's coaching you through this betrayal. Samantha Diaz's unethical conduct. All of it exposed. And option 2? Rebecca whispered. You confess publicly. You admit to adultery, conspiracy to commit fraud, and perjury. You waive all claims to marital assets, forfeit any custody rights to Mark, and disappear from our lives permanently. Rebecca stared at him in horror. You're asking me to give up everything. I'm offering you the chance to walk away with your life intact. My correction was precise. Because Rebecca, if you choose option 1, I will systematically destroy everyone who helped you. And Holland will lose her job when I expose her role in coaching married women to commit fraud. Samantha Diaz will face ethics violations that will end her career. Aaron Weaver. I paused, savoring the moment. Aaron Weaver will discover what happens when someone threatens my family. You can't threaten Aaron. He's already been arrested for assault, a misdemeanor. He'll be out on bail within hours. My smile was predatory. But Aaron made a critical error tonight. He drew a weapon on me in front of witnesses. That gives me legal justification for ongoing self-defense measures. Rebecca's eyes widened as she understood the implication. Clayton, you can't what? Protect myself from a man who's already demonstrated violent intent? Can't defend my family from someone who's threatened our stability? My voice remained conversational, which somehow made it more terrifying. Aaron Weaver picked a fight with the wrong soldier. He just doesn't know it yet. This isn't you, Rebecca said desperately. The man I married wouldn't. The man you married was an illusion. I interrupted. A facade I maintained because I thought I was protecting someone who deserved protection. You've revealed the truth about yourself, Rebecca. I'm simply returning the favor. The door opened and Clint Hampton returned, followed by Jason Garrett. Both men immediately sensed the change in atmosphere. Rebecca looked broken, while I appeared more relaxed than I had all evening. Gentlemen, I said pleasantly, my wife has something to tell you. Rebecca looked up at me, her face streaked with tears and mascara. For a moment I thought she might choose defiance, might force me to demonstrate the full extent of my capabilities. Instead, she chose survival. I want to make a deal, she whispered to Jason Garrett. I want to confess to everything. Clint's eyebrows rose. Rebecca, you should think about this carefully. I have thought about it. Rebecca's voice was stronger now, resigned, but determined. I've been thinking about it for 7 years without realizing it. Over the next hour, Rebecca Holloway systematically dismantled her own life. She confessed to adultery, conspiracy to commit fraud, and perjury. She waived all claims to marital assets and formally relinquished parental rights to Mark. I listened to each admission with clinical detachment, occasionally offering helpful details when Rebecca's memory proved incomplete. By the time she finished, her legal case was obliterated beyond repair. There's one more thing, I said as Rebecca signed the final document. Aaron Weaver. What about him? Clint asked. He'll be out on bail soon. When he is, he'll be angry, desperate, and looking for someone to blame for his situation. My eyes found Rebecca's. He might even decide that eliminating witnesses would solve his problems. Rebecca went pale. You think he'd hurt me? I think Aaron Weaver is a man who's lost everything and has nothing left to lose. In my experience, such men are capable of anything. I stood, straightening my shirt. Of course, that's not my problem anymore. As of tonight, Rebecca Holloway is no longer my responsibility. Clint unlocked the door. Clay, you're free to go. No charges filed. I paused at the threshold, looking back at the woman who had once been my wife. Goodbye, Rebecca. I hope Aaron Weaver treats you better than you treated me. As I walked through the police station, I felt the satisfying weight of complete victory. Rebecca was destroyed. Aaron Weaver was facing criminal charges and financial ruin, and their conspiracy had collapsed into mutual betrayal. But the real prize was waiting for me at home, the chance to raise my son without the toxic influence of people who viewed love as weakness and loyalty as stupidity. Clayton Holloway had declared war on his enemies and emerged victorious. Now it was time to collect the spoils of that victory and ensure that no one ever threatened his family again. Chapter 8. The Reckoning. I emerged from the police station into the pre-dawn darkness, breathing free air for the first time in hours. The city was quiet, most decent people asleep in their beds while predators and prey sorted out their eternal dance in fluorescent-lit rooms and concrete parking garages. My phone buzzed with a message from Lawrence. Target acquired. Aaron Weaver posted bail 20 minutes ago, currently at his apartment packing orders. I checked my watch. 3:30 a.m. Aaron was running, probably trying to distance himself from the wreckage of his life before I could make it worse. Smart move, but ultimately futile. Shadow him. I want to know where he goes and who he talks to. Non-interference unless he becomes a threat. Copy that. What about the other players? I considered. And Holland and Samantha Diaz were minor pieces in a game that was now over. They'd learned their lesson through proximity to the destruction of Rebecca and Aaron. Pursuing them further would be wasteful overkill. Let them go. They're no longer relevant. My next priority was Mark. Child Services would release my son into my custody within hours, assuming Rebecca's confession held up under legal scrutiny. I had no doubt it would. I'd been very thorough in ensuring she understood her options. The drive home took me past the Hampton Hotel, where crime scene tapes still fluttered around the parking garage entrance. By afternoon, the story would be in the newspapers. Decorated veteran uncovers wife's fraud conspiracy. The narrative would paint me as the wronged husband who'd fought back against systematic betrayal. Exactly the image I wanted to project. Public opinion would be crucial in the coming custody hearing. Judge and jury would see a war hero defending his family against manipulative predators, not a dangerous veteran stalking his wife. Rebecca's confession had guaranteed that narrative. My house felt different as I entered through the garage, cleaner somehow, as if removing Rebecca's presence had purified the air itself. I walked through rooms that no longer held the memory of her deception, seeing my home clearly for the first time in months. In my study, I powered up my surveillance system and reviewed the night's intelligence. Rebecca was being processed through county jail, probably spending her first night in a cell she'd never imagined occupying. Aaron's apartment building showed signs of hasty departure. Lights on, but no movement for the past hour. My secure phone rang. Lawrence with an update. Targets on the move. Heading south on Interstate 95, traveling fast. Looks like he's running for real. Any indication of destination? Negative. But Clay, he made some calls before leaving. Coupled to unknown numbers. One to what looks like a criminal attorney in Miami. I smiled. Aaron was probably trying to salvage something from his collapsed empire. Maybe liquidate assets before creditors seized everything. The man was thinking tactically, but not strategically. Running from immediate threats while ignoring long-term consequences. Stay with him. I want to know his final destination. Roger that. Oh, and Clay, he's got company. Black sedan. 2 occupants. Been following him since he left the apartment. Professional-grade surveillance. That was interesting. Aaron had attracted attention from someone with resources and motivation to track his movements. Police, federal agents, or someone else entirely? Can you identify the tail? Working on it. Plates are government issue, but that could mean anything these days. I pondered this development. If federal authorities were involved, it suggested Aaron's problems extended beyond adultery and fraud. The man might have been into something darker than real estate development. My phone buzzed with an incoming call from Child Services. Mark would be released into my custody at 8 a.m., assuming background checks cleared. I had no doubt they would. My military record was spotless. My civilian life equally clean. By contrast, Rebecca's fresh criminal confession made her an automatic disqualification for custody. At 6 a.m., I'd prepared breakfast and coffee, establishing the routine that would define our new life. Mark would need stability after the trauma of the past week. Predictable rhythms to replace the chaos of his mother's betrayal. The doorbell rang at exactly 8 a.m. I opened it to find a social worker accompanied by my son, who looked smaller and more fragile than I remembered. Mark's eyes were red-rimmed, probably from crying, and he clutched a plastic bag containing his few belongings from the foster home. Mr. Holloway, I'm Lynn Dwyer from Child Services. We need to go over some arrangements. I invited them in, noting how Mark avoided eye contact. The boy was probably struggling with conflicting loyalties, love for his father warring with confusion about his mother's fate. After Lynn Dwyer finished her paperwork and departed, I sat across from my son at the kitchen table. The silence stretched between them like a minefield, loaded with unexpressed questions and unspoken truths. Dad? Mark's voice was barely a whisper. Is Mom really in jail? Yes, because of what she did with Mr. Weaver. I studied my son's face, seeing intelligence beyond his years. Mark understood more than most adults gave him credit for. Yes, she made some bad choices, and now she has to face the consequences. Will she come back? No. My answer was final as a closing door. She won't be coming back. Mark absorbed this, his small hands folded on the table. Are you mad at me for bringing you that note? I felt something twist in my chest. Not quite sympathy, but recognition of collateral damage. Mark had been used as a messenger by adults who should have protected him from their wars. No, I said carefully. You did what you thought was right. But Mark, in the future, if anyone asks you to carry messages between adults, you come to me first. Understood? Mark nodded, relief visible on his young face. What happens now? Now we build a new life. Just the two of us. My phone buzzed with an update from Lawrence. Target reached Miami. Meeting with known associates of criminal defense attorney. Confirmed federal investigation ongoing. Multiple charges pending. I smiled. Aaron Weaver's problems were about to become far worse than anything I could have arranged. Sometimes the universe provided its own justice. Mark was watching me carefully. Dad, are you going to be different now? Different how? Mom said you might get sick because of the war. She said sometimes soldiers get broken. I felt cold rage burn through me at Rebecca's final betrayal, poisoning our son's mind against his own father, planting seeds of fear and doubt that might take years to overcome. Your mother said many things that weren't true, I replied evenly. I'm not broken, Mark. I'm exactly who I've always been. The only difference is that now there's no one pretending otherwise. As the morning sun streamed through our kitchen windows, I sat with my son and planned our future. Rebecca was gone. Aaron was running toward federal charges, and their conspiracy was nothing but wreckage. But the most important victory was sitting across from me, slowly learning to trust again. Mark would grow up understanding the difference between strength and weakness, loyalty and betrayal, justice and mercy. I had won more than a war. I'd secured my son's future. And in the end, that was the only victory that truly mattered. Chapter 9, New Foundations. 3 months later, I stood in my backyard, watching Mark practice with the baseball equipment we'd bought together. The boy's swing was improving, his confidence returning day by day like a flower gradually turning towards sunlight. The legal proceedings had concluded with surgical efficiency. Rebecca had been sentenced to 18 months for fraud and perjury, serving her time in a minimum security facility 3 states away. She'd written Mark exactly 1 letter, which I'd read first and then filed away, unopened. The boy deserved to make his own choice about contact when he turned 18. Aaron Weaver had proven to be an even more spectacular failure than I had anticipated. The federal investigation Lawrence had discovered was part of a massive real estate fraud scheme involving money laundering and tax evasion. Aaron was now facing 15 years in federal prison, his assets seized, his empire dissolved into legal settlements and creditor claims. And Holland had moved to another state after losing her job. Word of her role in the conspiracy had spread through their small professional community like wildfire. Samantha Diaz faced ethics violations that would likely end her legal career. The supporting cast of My War had scattered to the winds, their lives forever marked by their association with Rebecca's betrayal. "Dad, watch this!" Mark called out, preparing for another swing. I smiled, a genuine expression that felt foreign after months of calculated coldness. "Show me what you've got, champ." The boy connected solidly, sending the ball sailing across our yard. Mark pumped his fist in celebration, and I felt something I hadn't experienced since reading Clint Hampton's note, pure, uncomplicated joy. My phone buzzed with a message from Lawrence. "Final report attached. All loose ends tied up. Target confirmed. Incarcerated. No possibility of early release. Operation complete." I deleted the message without reading the attachment. That chapter of my life was closed. The book sealed and filed away. What mattered now was the future I was building with my son. "Mark," I called out. "Come here for a minute." The boy trotted over, baseball glove in hand, his face bright with exertion and happiness. "I want to tell you something important," I said, kneeling to meet his eyes. "What happened with your mother? It doesn't change who you are or who you can become. You're not responsible for her choices, and you're not limited by them." Mark nodded solemnly. "I know, Dad. You told me that before. I'm telling you again because it's important. You have the chance to be better than all of us, stronger, kinder, more loyal. But that's a choice you'll have to make every day for the rest of your life. What if I make the wrong choice sometimes?" I smiled. "Then you learn from it and make a better choice next time. That's what good men do, Mark. They learn, they grow, and they protect the people they love." Mark hugged his father, and I felt the last of my rage finally dissipate. Rebecca and Aaron had taken their betrayal to the grave of their former lives, but they couldn't touch what I was building now. That evening, after Mark was asleep, I sat in my study reviewing college fund investment options and youth baseball league schedules. The walls that had once been covered with surveillance equipment and operational planning now held photographs of father and son at fishing trips, baseball games, and camping expeditions. My secure phone rang one final time. Clint Hampton's voice carried across the encrypted connection. "Clay, just wanted you to know Rebecca's parole application was denied. She'll serve her full sentence." "Good to know," I replied, though it changed nothing. Rebecca's fate had been sealed the moment she chose betrayal over loyalty. "There's something else. Aaron Weaver was found dead in his cell this morning. Apparent suicide, though the circumstances are unusual. I felt no surprise, no satisfaction, no regret. I see. Clay, you wouldn't know anything about that, would you? Clint, I interrupted gently. I'm a single father raising a 10-year-old boy. My days are filled with homework, baseball practice, and bedtime stories. I don't have time for anything else, right? Of course. Clint was quiet for a moment. How's Mark doing? Better. We both are. After ending the call, I destroyed the secure phone and the encrypted communication equipment. That part of my life was officially over. Tomorrow, I would be nothing more dangerous than a devoted father helping his son with mathematics homework. I checked on Mark one final time before going to bed, watching the boy sleep peacefully in a room decorated with baseball posters and model airplanes. This was his real victory. Not the destruction of his enemies, but the preservation of his son's innocence and future. I had fought my war and won completely. Rebecca was imprisoned, Aaron was dead, their conspiracy was destroyed, and their supporters were scattered. But more importantly, Mark was safe, loved, and growing into the kind of man who would never betray the people who trusted him. As I turned off the lights and headed to my own room, I reflected on the fundamental truth I'd learned. Loyalty was everything. Betrayal was unforgivable. And some lines, once crossed, could never be uncrossed. My enemies had learned that lesson too late to save themselves. But Mark would grow up understanding it from the beginning. And that knowledge would serve as both shield and sword for the rest of his life. The war was over. The future belonged to the victors. And I had no intention of ever being defeated again. So tell me, what would you have done in my place when betrayal hit that close to home? Let me know in the comments below.